Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome everybody to this opening day of the Irving's Investing in Our Energy Futures Conference. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jamie Coughlin, and I am the director of the Magnuson Center for Entrepreneurship here at Dartmouth. I've been here since 2013, building out this entrepreneurial ecosystem for students, for faculty, for alumni, and our staff. And I am just super excited to be here with you tonight, celebrating the Irving Institute's inaugural conference. And what a conference it has been. I'm told about over 1,000 individuals have signed up and tuned in today. And just a big kudos and congratulations to the entire Irving team, the backdrop of conference and events to kick this off. Take it from someone who knows. This is a lot of heavy lifting, but boy, the momentum it's going to create is just going to be awesome and very exciting. And for us here to talk about tonight, this intersection between entrepreneurship and energy in our panel, advancing energy and entrepreneurship, what makes this panel so, I think, timely and unique is really representative in what is obviously known right now as the West End development of Dartmouth and happening, where the new Irving Institute for Energy and Society will have their beautiful, stunning, front and center new building. But for some of you may not know, the Magnuson Center for Entrepreneurship will be relocating to the West End this fall and winter to join the energy, the excitement, and the collegiality of the West End. And when you think about what makes a hallmark of just a successful entrepreneurial venture, it's about problem solving. And boy, the energy sector is just ripe with opportunities, problem statements of the moment, and just in timely need of innovation, entrepreneurial minds and thinkers. And it is just a real honor to be part of this inaugural conference, to be part of the West End, to work with teammates and partners like the Irving Institute. And I can tell you, this is going to be rocket fuel for innovation, energy, and entrepreneurship. And I am just really excited to be part of it come the fall and the winter. So tonight's panel, I am joined by two alumni that are just real leaders and innovators in their respective industries. And I'm going to take a moment to introduce them, and then we'll just jump into this conversation. So I'm first happy to introduce Julie Blunden. Julie is a proud member of the class of '88, and she has over more than 3 decades where she has rapidly grown emerging energy companies to leadership positions in their sectors, from power generation to retail power, solar energy, and EV fast charging. In her executive roles at EVgo, SunPower, Green Mountain Energy, she has raised billions of dollars from the public and private capital markets to scale market expansion, manufacturing, and customer acquisition. She began her career at AES, served as CEO, president, and director of ClimateWorks Foundation, and has been a director of a variety of not-for-profit organizations and trade groups, including New Energy Nexus, which we'll be talking more about tonight. Julie, welcome and pleasure to have you.
Thanks
Our other panelist is Russ Stidolph from the class of 1997. Russ is the founder of AltEnergy, a private equity firm focused on alternative energy investing. He also serves as the chair of EOS Energy Enterprises. AltEnergy has made numerous successful investments in the alternative energy space, some of which include Vervidity Energy, Tres Amigas, and EOS Energy Enterprises. Prior to forming AltEnergy, Russ was a principal at J.H. Whitney & Company, a middle market private equity firm where he started the firm's alternative energy investing practices. And probably more important than all of that, he is the proud father of a new incoming 25, his daughter, who will be joining the class of 2025 this fall. And Russ has also served as one of the inaugural founding donors to the Magnuson Center for Entrepreneurship to kick that off. So Russ, welcome. Julie, Russ, really excited to have you here. Let's jump into this conversation.
Thanks, Jamie.
So, folks, we wanted to kind of frame this, I think, in three different ways. One, talk about and get Julie and Russ to comment on their own entrepreneurial inspiration and really how they kind of frame the entrepreneurial opportunities ahead of us. Second, dive into a little bit about what are those opportunities? What are Julie and Russ seeing on the horizon that some of you in our audience who are thinking about joining a startup or founding a startup, what could you have your eye on? And then we'll close by just commenting, what can Dartmouth do better? What can the Irving Institute or the Magnuson Center, how can we all support this growing network of students, faculty, alumni, world-class leaders to solve these problems? And then we'll keep 15, 20 minutes for all of you to pose us some questions, comments, reflections, and you can do so in your Q&A feature on the screen that you're watching now. So, Julie, why don't we start with you? Talk a little bit about maybe some of your own entrepreneurial inspiration over the years and how you frame kind of looking ahead, the entrepreneurial opportunity of new organizations, nonprofits, or startups.
Sure. And thanks again for the invitation to be here. Great to have everything at Dartmouth that's been going on with energy and the environment kind of coming together now on the West End. That's fantastic. Let me start by saying this is an unbelievably incredible time to be part of the next generation of activity and energy, which is overwhelmingly going to be around electrification, both of the energy resources for buildings and industry, as well as for transportation. This is it. We have been working for decades to get here, and this is the decade of massive transformation that we're going to be going vertical on many dimensions, some of which we began last decade, but this decade is the one that's transformative. We can see the ultimate litmus test. The most entrenched incumbents in the energy industry have committed to not just decarbonization, but transformation into renewable energy companies of some ilk. The European utilities are ahead of U.S. utilities. The European oil and gas companies are ahead of U.S. oil and gas companies, but it's happening. So this is a great time to have this conversation. When I look back at my own experience, I've been part of 9 different companies in the energy sector. I've been through 4 IPOs. I've been through 4 major private transactions. I've been on 10 boards of directors or boards of advisors. So I've seen a lot over almost 35 years now. And what I can tell you is that when somebody speaks about entrepreneurship, they often think, if they have not gone through it themselves, as the HP origin story. 2 guys in a garage, probably in Palo Alto, and boom, miraculously, they go over to Sand Hill Road, they get some money, and a couple years later they go public and retire. That isn't actually my experience, although I spent quite a bit of time in Palo Alto. I never worked in my garage, and I never spent time on Sand Hill Road. However, I've been through multiple companies that have had early stage funding. And what I'll tell you is that I've had the opportunity to work with a bunch of folks that were close to a garage shop, poorly funded, not necessarily inclusive of folks that had done it before. They were first timers. And I've worked with folks that are extremely professional. They have done it multiple times. They've got lots of connections in the financial world. The second is better than the first to get something done quickly. This is not to diminish the opportunity of working out of your garage, which I'm sure many people have been doing over the last year. But I do think it's important to recognize that in my experience, the opportunity to work on an entrepreneurial basis with a group of folks that have been through the ringer, it improves your chance of success. In my NGO world, which I'll mention for just a sec before moving on to Russ, I currently sit on the board and have since 2013 of New Energy Nexus. It is the antithesis of everything I just described. We are all about seed funding little tiny companies, often 1 or 2 people, sometimes 3, around the globe to massively scale clean energy and access to decarbonized energy and transportation opportunities. Seed funding has been hard forever. We need to scale globally. The opportunities that we've had in the United States are sometimes hard to translate globally. And I do think that we need both. We need the true scrappy startups, and we need the opportunity to incubate within either an existing company, as we did with Cypress Semiconductor for SunPower, or within a format where you've got, in some cases, private equity firms or venture capitalists that have the ability to pull the team together that can actually accelerate change, not over a decade, but over, call it 10 quarters.
Mm-hmm. No, Julie, those are great, some reflections, and what comes to mind for me is just the diversity, quite frankly, of ways that people can participate in this entrepreneurial inflection point to energy, right? I mean, there is the established, like you said, scrappy entrepreneur syncing up with some more established individuals. And you also just mentioned the whole social enterprise realm, right? An NGO or being part of that mechanism. And I think that's just important for people in the audience to realize that there are multiple entry points. And Russ, maybe that's a good segue into you. I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You founded a financial services firm that has invested and backed a lot of these innovation players over the years, founders, established executives, et cetera. So what about, some reflections from your own maybe founder story, as well as things that you have seen to look forward in terms of some of those entrepreneurial opportunities that Julie was just speaking to?
Sure, Jamie, I'd love to chat about that, and couldn't agree with Julie more. I mean, backing and funding early stage startups is where you really get to see innovation, and also it allows people to cut their teeth. I had a very traditional exit from Dartmouth where I ended up doing the investment banking thing for a few years, decided I didn't want to be on the sell side, which was transactional oriented, and wanted to invest in companies, and was fortunate enough to move over to the buy side. And that's where I went to J.H. Whitney. And, the managing partner pulled me aside and said, look, what do you want to focus on? And this was back in like 1999. And I said, clean tech and renewable energy. And people literally and figuratively thought I was crazy like Don Quixote back then, because I wanted to chase windmills. But I said, look, every single one of these technologies has a point of inflection. And, we need to identify that point of inflection and then start building opportunities around it. And wind was one of the first, then solar, now batteries, grid, infrastructure, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the things that really changed my outlook and gave me a skill set and a toolbox that really banking or even venture capital didn't prepare me for was playing an operational role. And that was really, getting out there, whether it's in the field or in the back office or at the portfolio company level, and rolling up your sleeve. And I got to play, CFO and active board member. But early on, I remember I was out in the cornfields in Iowa, putting up Met towers, signing up options with farmers for wind easements, and learning everything I could know about the wind industry. And that led to us starting a company called Iowa Winds, which we sold to Alliant, and then it got us in the biofuels business. And there's a lot of serendipity there, but really, Jamie, my thought process is banking and venture capital investing is great, but one of the things that Magnuson and what Julie was talking about in terms of backing startups, which is probably even more important, is allowing people to play operational roles, allow them to run with ideas, and then also allow them to fail. I mean, look, I've got tons of battle scars from the clean tech companies that we funded that, probably were on the verge of, problems, and we worked through it. We got them out of the trough and, onto the summit, and they became great success stories, but not without, their moments of darkness and moments of weakness. So, when you talk about what people should be doing, what they should be thinking about, and what's going to give them the tools to be successful, it's rolling up your sleeves and living the life. And it's like, find something you're passionate about in the space, finding a big picture idea that you want to get behind, and then taking the entry level position you can in that space and making it happen. And that is what makes successful CEOs. It's starting from that, position one and working your way up the ladder. And, it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of work, and a lot of, sleepless nights, but it's awesome.
And so, Russ, to kind of build on this, what are some of the opportunities that you're seeing now and ahead of you? Sure. Again, for, being useful for those in the audience that are trying to make some, calculated decisions. What are things on the horizon for you?
So Jamie, there's no doubt, like Julie said, we're finally in the right place at the right time. The work we did decades ago was an uphill battle into the wind. And in the past 2 or 3 years, people have realized, one, this is not just about feeling good about what you're doing, because we all feel good about the industry we're backing and investing in, but economically, environmentally, socially, globally, all of this makes sense. It's black and white. Renewable energy is the cheapest form of power these days. But renewable energy does bring problems to the grid and to the ecosystem, and that's what we're talking about right now. As we phase out traditional forms of what I will call thermal power, i.e., coal, some natural gas, some nuclear, and we bring on all these renewables, which are extremely cost effective and exciting. We have a bunch of opportunities and problems. And, the sort of the one at the tip of the spear is intermittency. The wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. So how do we solve that? Especially when you think about the electricity grid, which is probably the most archaic, uninvested infrastructure asset in this country in the past, 50 years. We have to bring it to the 21st century. We have to find a solution to our intermittency issues. And all of that comes with modern technology, last mile resources, i.e. rooftop solar, backyard storage, and then, a lot of additional investment in transmission. There were a bunch of panels earlier today where transmission investment was a very key topic of conversation. And it's one of the areas that it's harder to invest in. So when I think about where are we heading? Well, look, we're electrification, we're grid modernization or transformation, and it's all about last mile storage, data, software, and optimization. And that stuff we've been working on for decades, and it's finally ready for prime time, and that's where I think people should be focused on as one area. There's so many areas in clean tech and renewables that people can focus on, but this is going to be the area that probably attracts the most capital.
Yeah, no, that's great. And Julie, back to you. I mean, earlier in kind of preparation for this panel, you really talked about your passion for this NGO that you're a part of, the New Energy Nexus, and how it's kind of, again, thinking about working with innovators and entrepreneurs. You alluded to it earlier in your opening statement, but tell us more about that process, because that seems to have a framework for, again, supporting these various startups, kind of globally. And what is it seen through that lens of both what is a successful entrepreneur and a successful opportunity?
Yeah, sure. One of the things that's super interesting is New Energy Nexus has been in the process of expanding its efforts to incubate and accelerate clean energy startups around the world now for about 5 years. And in the last 3 years, it's really taken off. One of the things that's interesting is in the United States, we actually have public dollars going into incubation of clean tech, because there's an acknowledgement that it is possible through the great work of folks like Russ to take a group of folks with, for example, some great GE credentials and get them funded and moving on a particular technology. There's also a host of ancillary efforts that come to the question of things like, how are we going to implement FERC Order 2222, which allows distributed assets to actually participate in wholesale markets? That order will be implemented over the next 2 years, and that will unleash the kind of shift that we haven't seen since another set of Dartmouth alums, one of whom is now sitting in the White House, did with Enernoc, bringing demand response into the grid. This is another one of those moments where we fundamentally redesign how markets are operating, and all of the consequences to that are a mass shift of where opportunities will exist to invest in both the deployment of distributed technologies, as well as all of the software and hardware that's required to make that work. So there's going to be a period here of 5 to 10 years where we quite literally disrupt, while we're keeping the lights on, how the grids are operating. And there will be tension between how fast we can make that happen against how fast we can make new transmission happen. Both will happen.
Julie,
but there's
yeah, no,
competition's good.
I mean, these are words and frameworks that I think are true and dear to my heart: incubation, acceleration. So, extending your thought process to this idea of what can Dartmouth do to kind of better support this growing network of, obviously, our alumni. I mean, as evidence of this conference today, again, right, the amount of people that it's curating, bringing it together. Do you think this model of incubation is something that maybe even Dartmouth thinks about at the, say, Magnuson Center and maybe even the Irving Institute level, to identify, support some of those future entrepreneurs that are pursuing some of these timely ideas?
I'd love to see it. There's a network that's growing now between the global incubators and accelerators. In fact, we were just talking with the team in Australia that we know well. We published a book at New Energy Nexus called Accelerate This. Honest to God, you can find it on Amazon. It's basically accelerator in a box or in a book. I think it would make a ton of sense for the business and engineering schools at places like Dartmouth, particularly Dartmouth is an excellent example because of the connections between the two already, to look for ways to take great ideas and launch them, as well as figuring out, and I think I went to Stanford for Business School and they do a great job of this. How do you connect folks that are in undergraduate and graduate programs to the little companies that are trying to get off the ground? I have a great example of working in the office underneath mine, currently working with a Stanford business student who's just about to graduate his second year. He's working almost full time for my husband. So I love the idea of giving people extremely real world opportunities. And I think that being physically in New Hampshire is a benefit. You've got a great set of good thinking and better than average market thinking in the New England ISO and next door in New York. So it's a good idea. We should talk about how to.
And then on top of that, obviously, the uniqueness of just the D plan and the calendar, right? The academic calendar that affords our students the off terms to then also go to these various markets to engage further.
I personally benefited.
Yeah, but it's well said from the standpoint of, the entrepreneurial path doesn't always have to be as a founder. It can also be as an early stage teammate, partner, employee, intern, as you're saying. And I think that's important for us to continuously express that, because these are various ways to engage.
In fact,
Russ,
let me
close out, Julie.
Yeah, let me add a point there. I am not a founder. I couldn't be more clear on that. I am somebody who identifies great opportunities, looks around and checks who is likely to be able to anchor on something. My goal is to get over the finish line. That's who I am. And I'm going to find the best team to get something done, hook onto that and help them. I'll work my butt off to make it work. But it's interesting because when I was at my 25th reunion way back in 2013, I was sitting on an entrepreneurship panel, and it was clear that there were a couple of the other panelists who sort of debated my credential as an entrepreneur. And I thought, that's so odd. They think that if you're not sitting in a garage, that you're not an entrepreneur. Yes, you can be. I was one of 35 founders at Green Mountain Energy Company. Every one of us was an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, I can unequivocally say what the philosophic and the flavor of entrepreneurship that we're building at Dartmouth is one that runs the entire kind of spectrum of roles and types of entrepreneurial endeavors. Why? Because it's in our DNA as an institution, right? I mean, this is a liberal arts institution where people come to us with a myriad skill sets, backgrounds, and interests. And again, it's about entrepreneurial thinking applied to a particular endeavor. So, Russ, what do you think the opportunity is for Dartmouth? I mean, we have great conversations about building out the entrepreneurial community in this network, this intersection, obviously, with energy. But I mean, I just keep time again the immense value and talent and passion we have in this alumni community for moving some of these ideas forward. But what are some maybe closing thoughts on your mind that you would like to see Dartmouth, take more of an active role in to help move some of these things forward?
Sure. So look, Jamie, I think leaving Dartmouth and then starting a company and being a founder is a very long putt. You can be successful, but highly unlikely that you're going to get to the finish line on that first one out of the box. What I would say the most important thing to do is pick an area that you're passionate about, that you might have what I will call founder ideas as it relates to opportunities and transformative business models, and get a job. And I think this is more important than anything else, because the traditional career path of going into banking, consulting, or legal, whatever it might be, you're not going to get the on-the-job experience that you would if you went to a Pattern Energy or NextEra, or working at a utility. I mean, to understand how these business models work and how they can be fixed is probably the most important thing you could do. And then you can layer on sort of the banking or the investing or the legal if you want to do that. But really, the way to find your path to being a successful founder is to start at the very entry level. And so what can Dartmouth do? We can open up our doors for folks that want to be interns at portfolio companies. If you have a position at a utility, let's find a Dartmouth, grad or undergrad that wants a job. And I will tell you this, and this is where you guys are leaps and bounds ahead of everybody else. You're a tremendous asset for those employers. I mean, for them to get their hands on people like a Dartmouth undergrad that want to be entrepreneurial, that want to be leaders, that want to contribute to society, you're a diamond in the rough. So our job as alums, and our job as the Magnuson Center, and our job as a network, is to find those homes for you. Let you learn what you can learn. It might be great, it might be painful, it might be a failure, but after 2 or 3 years of doing that, you're going to figure out what you want to do, how you're going to do it, and you'll have an idea as to what you want to do for the rest of your life. So we're here as a sounding board. We're here as a sort of a facilitator. And as Julie said, I mean, the most important thing that she and I do is we're not necessarily founders. We're enablers. We're problem solvers, and we're probably more stubborn than smart, because we hit our heads on a wall and we just plow through it, and we get these clean tech companies across the finish line. And that's what it takes. But I would just encourage all of you to pick a spot, get a job, learn about it, and then figure out where you want to go from there.
No, well said. Well said. And again, it's about that networking, kind of organizing that network for the benefit of our students, but also benefit of obviously all of you as alumni, right? By better, bringing that framework together, identifying who those people are. It just, I think, shows the richness of our community to kind of help each other and lean in. So let's jump into some Q&A with our audience and turn our attention to some of the questions that are kind of rapidly coming in here, and I'll do my best to organize them and try to address all of them. But Julie, here's one that maybe you can speak to a little bit. The question is, so what government policies are most needed to inspire some of these new energy transitions, and what are some of the biggest challenges with respect to the policy side of the equation?
So one of the most important things, and I'll hark back to what Abby and Tom were talking about in the last panel, a huge amount of what we need in the United States to have done for policy to enable the grid to be decarbonized is well on its way. And it's basically been in progress since 1978, when we did the Public Utility Regulatory Policy Act. I don't want to suggest that we should get away with state policy engagement at SEIA or at ACP, because we shouldn't. But at this point, the grid is going green. Definitive timelines are being met. There's debates and struggles in places like Texas after the debacle this winter, but it's inevitable because that's where the prices are taking us. What we need is to make sure that the regulatory efforts related to those transitions get worked out at the pace of markets and technology, not historical regulatory pace. That's a challenge. Regulators tend to think in 2 and 3 year horizons. When they open a new OIR, they're thinking, 2 or 3 years, I'll get that done. I'll give Chair Glick credit at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. He's serious about his Order 2222, which is really a dramatic market shifting national policy that will be implemented in each regional transmission operator status. He's expecting that to move forward within 2 years. That is insanely fast for FERC, insanely fast. And yet, if you look at what the market is doing right now, the market is, we have queues, lines waiting at RTOs that are in some cases larger than the installed base of all electric generation in just batteries to go onto the grid. We have a line of developers who have sites, who in some cases have offtake agreements, who have transmission, who've put money down to be in the transmission queue. They are ready to go, and we can't get them online fast enough. My good friend Elliot Mainzer, who's now CEO at the California Independent System Operator as of October 1st, is looking at ways to accelerate, and they've just put out a new white paper. Anybody who's interested in this should absolutely take a look at that. Engagement is right now on very specific protocols for how they're going to operate with state of charge, minimum state of charge, before peak periods this summer in the California ISO, so we don't have blackouts. It's those little technical details that make a world of difference. And unfortunately, they are nerdy and full of acronyms. And if you want to talk about them, I would love to.
We'll direct them your way. Russ, any comments there, or would you like to take another question?
So the only thing I will say, and I think Julie will agree with me, the concept of grid and entrepreneurship is an oxymoron. Just because the grid happens to be one of the most risk-averse, slow-moving entities in the United States, kind of like an iceberg. And we are starting to see movement, some of the things that Julie was talking about, and it's not going to happen overnight. So those little things like state of charge, California duck curve, getting batteries out of the interconnect grid, sort of queue and onto the system, those are the things that are going to make a little bit of a difference, and they're going to add up. And so if you're going to go into the space, you have to realize, especially if you're looking at grid transformation, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle, but it is finally turning. And this is exciting. And this is exciting for all the stuff we've been doing for the past few decades, because those little turns are going to make a massive difference in terms of the energy ecosystem in this country with electrification, resiliency, i.e. clean technology. So not much to add, except you're going to have your struggles, but we can make little differences, and a couple of those little differences add up to a lot.
No, that's great. I think this is a great kind of, as we get to the 10-minute mark, maybe some closing thoughts. Russ, what are your biggest lessons that you have learned in your career that are specific to energy, and what advice can you share to help others navigate these kinds of challenges?
Sure. So look, from an experience standpoint, we've covered, get in at the ground floor, learn a lot, and then figure out what you want to do. From an investing standpoint, or backing what I will call clean technology or renewable energy companies, I've got tons of battle scars to show for that. And I often found that, look, you have a lot of great companies out there, but their ideas are typically ahead of their time, i.e. the market's not ready for them. They're oftentimes underfunded because they're not, revenue or cash flow positive yet. And so you have to learn to fight the fight and live the struggle. And then, if you're going to back the companies, be prepared for some very challenging situations. And then the trick is, when you experience those challenging situations, there are solutions. I mean, unless the technology you're backing has a fatal flaw, i.e. the chemistry doesn't work, or, the market's not going to be accepting of it, you just have to realize that there is a way to get across the finish line. And that's where you got to be stubborn and smart, but stubborn about, I am going to do everything in my power to get this across the finish line. And that's, finding partners, finding capital, finding customers. And if you keep at it, you will be successful. And, I guess stubbornness is something everybody needs to learn and everybody needs to embrace, especially if you're going to, participate in this ecosystem.
Yeah, I oftentimes refer to it as the stick-with-itness.
Yeah.
right? Just sticking with it, sticking with it. Julie, what do you, just some of your own reflections on your career, biggest challenges, and how have you kind of overcome some of those?
I'd say find your allies. And that is true whether you're speaking Wall Street, utility regulatory processes, coordinating between competitors. Allies make a big difference. And if you're a startup, you need friends in high places. And it makes a big difference if you have, for example, a large customer who cares. We just saw over the weekend, Jeff Bezos drove one of the Rivian pickup trucks out to his space site.
Yeah.
Rivian has been a long time coming, and I am thrilled that they are pulling this off. They are going to be an incredible story. I'm hoping. I have seen their first Amazon trucks in LA, by the way. They're going to be 1 in a million, though. And one of the reasons that they're going to pull it off, as far as I can tell, is because they've got Amazon as a partner. And when you've got a partner like that, you can, with that kind of a purchase order, with that kind of support, whether it's a policy team or a communications team or the IR team, that'll make a world of difference.
Yep. No, that's a great reflection. It's the company you keep for sure. And I think that's, again, what makes our network so special, because hopefully the viewers can, through this conference, see the immense talent and supporters around them in this Dartmouth community, and draw upon them over their careers. I do want to get to a technical question, Russ, that just came in that hopefully you can maybe take just a quick minute here. What are some entrepreneurial solutions to intermittency at the utility scale are being developed that address the dual needs for reliability and affordability at the consumer level?
Sure. So the way that I view the grid is that everything's an energy asset. If it produces energy, if it uses energy, or if it stores energy, it's an asset on the grid. And with software technology and an open market, you're able to keep all of that in balance. And that is what we're talking about developing. That's what we're going to see develop over the next decade. And that's how we're going to deal with the intermittency issues of renewables. 5-10 years ago, batteries were not economically viable as a asset for the grid. Today, batteries are dirt cheap, and give Elon Musk and Tesla a ton of credit for that. Their ramp up of the EV industry has driven down the cost of traditional forms of lithium ion batteries. And now you have an opportunity with new entrants, with alternatives to lithium ion technology out there that also make a ton of sense for the grid. And I'm a big believer in that from one of our portfolio companies. And by taking energy assets, tying them all together, whether they're in the middle of nowhere or they're at the last mile, i.e. somebody's backyard, and that could be rooftop solar and a Tesla Powerwall or a small battery system attached to somebody's house. When you string all that together with some fancy software, which is not easy, which is not expensive, but easy to develop these days, you can keep that grid in balance. And that's what's going to happen. You're going to have software and data tie everything together. You're going to have cheap storage out there, allowing people to solve their intermittency and reliability issues. And then you're going to have solar and wind everywhere you can stick it. 20 years ago, I never thought I would put my head on the pillow every night and think that my kids were going to have renewable energy that was virtually free. And that's actually where we are today. And so when we layer on the software and the technology and the storage, we've solved a very big problem. And then as a campus and as a community, our job is to take that solution and now spread it across the globe, because we're fortunate enough to have it here. But in developing countries and third world countries, that's where they need it more than we do. And it's our job to roll that out.
Julie, as maybe just an extension, this will be our final question, then we'll do some closing thoughts. Question came in: what are some of the big energy startups on the horizon are going to be the biggest, say, in the next 10 years that maybe some of our audience members should, I don't know, after this session, look more into, from the standpoint of getting more involved, maybe becoming that intern, that future employee? Any that kind of come to mind that you could maybe just share with our with our viewers?
Yeah, so this is the moment to look at the integration between the transportation sector and the power sector. We are going to electrify transportation. That's not an if. That is an already committed to. The automakers have told their investors and have put their capital into transportation electrification. That intersection, there's very few people, very few, that have worked on both sides of that. I'm an aberration for being able to speak both languages. This is a great time to get into the transportation sector if you're interested in the power sector, because they are now linked from here forward. I would also say the work that is happening in the battery sector is going to be domesticated from a manufacturing and supply chain perspective, unlike what we saw happen with solar. It isn't that way right now, but we're much earlier in the process of scaling manufacturing. So whether you're talking about recovering lithium from Lithium Valley at the Salton Sea in Imperial County, California, or talking about the chemistries for lithium, or the alternative technologies like one of Russ's portfolios, EOS, which I think is a very, very cool company. Those moments of opportunity of being right engaged, whether in the development side, whether you're in the manufacturing side, whether you're in the supply chain side, this is the moment. Jump in right now.
So 30 seconds, any closing thoughts to piggyback that?
I can't top that. I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, jump in right now. I love batteries. Batteries are the future. But you know, that last mile between the car and the grid, that's where it's at. It's all about the last mile resource. And I think the best analogy is what we saw happen with telephones. You know, 50 years ago, it was Ma Bell and one big network and one big backbone. And then it went cell phones. And how many people still have landlines? Not that many. Everything is at the last mile and it's in people's pockets. The same thing is going to happen with electrification. And the thing that excites me more about that opportunity, it's not in this country. Again, it's in the developing world where, you know, before, to get electricity to the people who don't have it, you had to build massive infrastructure. And now we can just deploy rooftop solar and resilient stationary storage batteries, and people who couldn't have electricity a decade ago can have cheap, clean, and affordable renewable energy in their backyard. So, you know, jump in, have fun. The most important thing is actually to have fun. And if you do have fun, there's a good chance you'll be successful.
So takeaways, right? Find your passion, right? Jump in, as we're obviously saying. Leverage that entrepreneurial lens to see these opportunities for what they are, prioritize them, but take that leap of faith. Go on sometimes that intuition and that passion that you may have as an individual. Network, right? Surround yourselves. We're starting that with this, obviously, this conference, the Magnuson Center for Entrepreneurship, bringing this alumni network together. It's there for the taking. Reach out and get off the sidelines, right? And be a little bit stubborn along the way. So Russ, Julie, just a big warm thank you. Just some really invaluable insights for obviously for me and for our viewers. Can't thank you both enough, and hope you enjoyed the conversation. I'm going to close this out just by directing our viewers to the Irving Energy website that's been set up for this conference, energyconference.dartmouth.edu. They have the full agenda for the next 2 days, so check it out. And as we kind of log off here and end this particular session, I encourage everybody who's still on to move to the lounge areas within the platform that everybody's viewing, where you can kind of gather and continue this exciting discussion around this intersection of energy and entrepreneurship and moving this ball forward. So thank you all for joining. Be well and enjoy the remaining days ahead. Russ, Julie, thank you again.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, Julie.